Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along today. As you might have heard me just say there, this is my first year really getting involved with Fashion Revolution and Fashion Revolution Week. My name's Mairi, and today we'll be exploring a piece of research I conducted in early 2019 with a focus on the state of sustainable fashion in Scotland, and also some practical steps you can take to promote conscious consumerism and encourage more sustainable behaviour in consumers and citizens. And I just wanted to point out kind of what we'll achieve today. You don't need to be a brand or a business owner to be able to use these tips. And they work for any form of communication you're putting out there. So whether you are an organisation posting on Instagram, if you're trying to engage your local community, or even if you're just talking to a friend and trying to get them more involved in the issues, you'll be able to put these into action. So I hope that by the end of this talk, you'll be equipped with some practical ideas on how to engage individuals in the sustainable fashion conversation and encourage them to join in with the community and collective action that we need. So I just want to briefly start introducing Fashion Revolution. This is the last day of Fashion Revolution Week, so you've probably heard this a few times, but for those who haven't, Fashion Revolution is a global charity and movement, and they campaign for a clean, safe, fair, transparent and accountable fashion industry. And they do this through research, education, collaboration, mobilisation and advocacy. And so each year, 1 week in April, we hold Fashion Revolution Week. And this is to commemorate the garment workers who lost their lives in the Rana Plaza disaster. And so in 2013, on the 24th of April, Rana Plaza, which was an 8-storey commercial building in Dhaka in Bangladesh, collapsed. And this killed over 1,000 people. And the majority of these people were garment workers producing clothing under awful working conditions for big brands in the West that we buy our clothes from in the UK and other countries. So it was a huge crisis in the industry, and the launch of Fashion Revolution was a response to this. And then Fashion Revolution Week falls on the week of that collapse each year to commemorate that and just ensure we're still making progress. So that was 7 years ago, and there are still issues, but Fashion Revolution has made a lot of good progress, lots of campaigning and education, and they have a particular focus on the Who Made My Clothes campaign, where they ask and enable consumers to put pressure on the big brands with the hashtag Who Made My Clothes. So you might have seen that like popping up on online the past week. And this year, all events have been online due to coronavirus, so it's been a very different experience, but I've connected with people worldwide, so it's been really interesting. So on this next screen, I'm going to ask you to participate. I hope that's okay. You don't have to speak or get up and do anything. You just have to get your phone out or another browser and laptop, and if you go to slido.com and enter fashion in the kind of box at the top there, you should be able to get involved. So I just want to start with kind of asking you what sustainable fashion is all about. So don't think too hard, just any words that pop up, anything you might have seen this week, or even what you kind of think the wider society views sustainable fashion as. And hopefully as you start typing these in, they should appear on the screen here. Any words that kind of pop into your head. Oh, we have one, human rights. That's a great one to see. What is important with sustainable fashion is that Rana Plaza and coronavirus outbreak now has really shown us that sustainability within fashion isn't just about the environment, and this has been a major shift in the past few years. So there are words on here such as planet, circular economy, that kind of are related to the environment and other things. But it's nice that there are a lot of words here to do with working ethics, human rights, workers, production, that are to do with people as well as the planet. It is an issue that the word sustainable has been connected to just environmental issues. So it's really good to see that that is changing, and obviously a lot of people here are already engaged in that conversation. So that's why, but it's definitely improving. And the coronavirus outbreak has really emphasised the broken system of the current fashion industry, and that's one that's fueled by a drive for profit with disregard for people and the planet, which is what needs to change. So COVID-19 has really just exposed the failures and the lack of resilience of the systems within fashion. It's brought the whole industry to a halt, and it's left many vulnerable garment workers in Bangladesh losing their jobs with no severance pay and being unable to feed their families, and it's just not okay. And so the whole system, it is unsustainable for the survival of the planet, but it's also unsustainable for people and the industry itself. Sustainable fashion is more than just whether our materials are made from organic cotton or not. And this is a message that everyone here today can really help be understood by wider society. And it's really encouraging that there are so many words on here that reflect that. What also is been interesting, although COVID-19 obviously is an awful situation, and lockdown has really forcing us to consider alternative forms of consumption, and mainly digital right now, but also post-pandemic. So for example, even this talk, you're not buying a product right now, but you're still engaging in the conversation and getting involved. And so it's really encouraged us to consider what fashion has to offer beyond simply selling products, and what will be considered sustainable post-pandemic. So there is a real opportunity here to initiate these alternative offerings, such as buying less, getting involved with community groups, learning sewing skills, and much more. So really what I wanted to sum up here is that we need system change, and for that system change, we need collective action and collaboration. So today we'll be exploring how to encourage citizens to adopt more sustainable behaviours to help drive that system change, so that we can create a positive fashion industry that everyone can be proud of and celebrate. So there's some pictures on the screen now of me in some nice dresses. And I'd just like to ask you 2 questions. You don't have to answer for this, you can just think about it in your head. But the first question is, which dress do you think was more expensive? And then the second question is, which dress do you think is from a fast fashion brand? 1 or 2. I'm not going to give you too long to consider these because they're actually both trick questions. Both of these dresses are from fast fashion brands, and they were both just £6. But one of them is more sustainable than the other, and that is number 2, because this was bought from a charity shop and was bought second hand, although it originally was from a fast fashion company. So I just wanted to show you this to firstly highlight my own personal journey from fast fashion to getting involved with sustainable fashion over the past 4 years. This was during my time at university. The first one was the first year university ball, and the second one was just last year for a graduation ball. And also to emphasise again that sustainable fashion doesn't mean just buying sustainably or ethically made products. It can be secondhand, learning to sew, having a clothes swap, upcycling, repairing, and so much more. So whilst big brands use their marketing and communications with consumers to just sell as much product as possible to get that profit, today the tools I'm going to share with you can be used to promote a wide range of different behaviours depending on what your goal is. I've already showed you me in my 2 dresses, but my name is Mairi Lowe, and I am a socially conscious marketer and digital creator, and I offer these services on a freelance basis. I'm also currently studying for my Masters in Social Innovation at Glasgow Caledonian University in Scotland. And this course, everyone asks me what it means, and it's really relevant to this topic. So it's kind of around social justice, and the university describes social innovation as the development of new ideas, services and models to better address social issues, which often involves the empowerment of disadvantaged groups and the restructuring of power relations in the ways they're implemented. So there's a real focus on collaboration and changing systems, which is really relevant right now to the fashion industry. And then last year, I graduated from fashion management at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. And this is where I completed the piece of research that I'm sharing with you today. So this research was done in 2019, quite early on, but it is still very relevant, I think, anyway. And so this is the ebook here, which is the piece of research I conducted, and it is available to download at mairilowe.com/ebook, but I'll put the link up at the end of the talk for you. And this is my friend Sarah and I, who's on the call, finally handing in our dissertations after much stress. That was a good day. So I just wanted to tell you quickly why I decided to do this topic in the first place, and focusing on Scotland particularly. So we had a lot of freedom in 4th year, and for like our dissertation, which was really good. One thing that did kind of lack in the course was a focus on sustainability. But from talking to other students and graduates across Scotland and even other countries, apparently this is quite a common theme in higher education and all education. So I really did enjoy the course, and I don't want to badmouth it at all, but this is definitely something that needs to be integrated into education on a whole a lot more, and particularly in fashion. But because we had the freedom in fourth year, I was able to study sustainability and explore that myself with the support of my supervisor, which was good. And in the book as well, I've said I can't really pinpoint an exact moment where I decided that sustainable fashion was where I wanted to kind of look into. But I do know that one reason that influenced that was the people that I met and worked with over the past 2 or 3 years. There was a lot of people I've met that have been working in fashion, and how they can use fashion for good, for social and environmental positive impacts. And it kind of just showed me a side of fashion that I hadn't really even considered before, that could be like a job or a way to live my life, I guess. And then from this, it just led me to realizing that I really wanted to do something that would have an impact on the real world. You know, even if it didn't change the world overnight, even if it helped one person a little bit. And that's why I decided to do a practice-based project, which meant instead of doing a 12,000 word dissertation, I did kind of a 4,500 word academic piece, and then the ebook was the other half of my submission. So it just meant it would be a lot more accessible, and I could share it, you know, now and in future for the people that need the help from it, rather than just submitting it and then it being lost in university forever. So within the book, you might have read it already, if not, don't worry. And there's kind of 2 or 3 main sections. So the first is looking at the Scottish consumer and sustainable fashion in Scotland as a whole. And we talk about who the typical sustainable consumer is, the changing attitudes over the past few years, and whether they have changed or not. And then the barriers which prevent people from participating in sustainable fashion in Scotland. The second section is engage, educate, empower. And this is the 3 stages in the framework that I came up with, which has all the practical steps that you can use to encourage people to change their behaviour. And then finally, we have profile pages with all the people that I interviewed. So Ruth is here, she's watching just now. There is a wide variety of different people, not just business owners again. So I interviewed 9 people in the industry who all practice and promote sustainable values through their work in one way or another. And we had some really interesting and insightful conversations from these. We spoke about the current state of fast fashion and the industry in Scotland, and we discussed each interviewee's work and their experience with sustainability in fashion. And then finally, we spoke about what strategies have worked and what strategies have not worked for them in persuading consumers to practice more sustainable behaviour. And this is what really led to the development of the recommendations. So in the book, there's a profile page for each of the participants with links on how you can follow them and just a bit more information about what they're doing in Scotland in particular. So I'm just going to, for the structure of this talk, go through each of those 2 sections, but I'm not going to just read the book out because you can do that yourself after. But the first section is the Scottish consumer, and as I said, we've kind of answered the questions that are on the screen here through the conversations and through the interviews and through all the hours I spent transcribing all those interviews. So the first part is the sustainable consumer. And the finding was that in Scotland, the typical sustainable consumer is mostly female, is ethically minded, with a social and environmental conscience, and appreciates quality over quantity. And recently someone asked me, what about men? And my initial reaction was kind of, oh, I don't really know. But the point was that from the conversations I had, the interviewees identified women in Scotland as being the most engaged. So the person who said this to me suggested that maybe some men, and also this is a huge generalisation, kind of practice sustainable behaviours by not buying as many clothes. But my point was that they're not really conscious of this. And so what we're talking about here is the people that are actively engaged and want to get involved. And then with ethically minded, social and environmental conscience, this just relates to, obviously there's a lot of talk right now about the climate crisis, but not necessarily with fashion. So for example, the rise of plant-based diets, and then all the news on plastic pollution. So, and in social, it's if someone identifies as being a feminist, or is interested in human rights. That's kind of where the overlap would be, and why they would also be interested in sustainable fashion. And there's more quotes in the book on that, as to why, and the discussions we had to kind of justify that and explain it a bit better. So the second one is changing attitudes, where interviewees identified an increase in Scottish consumers' awareness of their impact on the environment in recent years, but most did agree that there's a confusion of how sustainability applies to fashion, especially regarding environmental issues. And I wonder if you agree with this or not. Again, this was early 2019, but I personally do think it is still applicable. And so citizens are concerned about the climate change, as I said, and sustainable fashion is really part of this wider conversation. But with the rise of vegan diets and minimising plastic usage, the environmental impacts of clothing have not received as much attention. And so it's not an area of concern for some people that are environmentally conscious, simply due to the kind of lack of understanding and attention it's got on the news and such. So in the book, we discussed there have been certain documentaries that have helped increase awareness. Fashion Revolution has definitely grown with the number of events and people wanting to get involved, but sustainability is still not driving purchasing decisions in Scotland. And the reason for this, or one reason, is there are many barriers preventing people from practicing sustainable behaviour, and it's not just price. So this is a clue here. This is the second time I'd like you to get involved again. So if you go back onto slido.com and insert fashion, you should see a screen asking you what barriers prevent sustainable behaviour. And I've given you one already, so that's price. So someone feel free to put that in to get you started. But this could be what prevents yourself from getting involved, or what you found your friends' kind of experience to be, or customers yourself. So I'm just interested to see if the ones up here relate to the ones that I found from my research. They can definitely be categorised into groups and themes. There is, I can already see there's a lot here that did come up in my research, and there is a couple here that probably didn't come up or are slightly different from the ones from my research actually. The barriers that I came up with all developed from the conversations with the people I interviewed, and they didn't say exactly, these words, but just from our conversations, I did kind of a thematic analysis and put them into the categories. And what I would recommend doing is considering how your work tackles each of these barriers and where you can kind of have the biggest impact and what you would like to address and provide a solution to. So I'm going to move on now, but if you want to keep adding, feel free, because they'll be available later on if you want to have a look. So these are the 9 barriers that we decided on, determined from my research. And by addressing these barriers, you can help the consumer go from just having good intentions to actually taking that action. And this is what is known as the intention behaviour gap in academia. And it is a key approach to causing behavioural change, which is the goal here. So by addressing these barriers and removing them for consumers, you can make it as easy as possible for them to get involved and take that action. And this also applies to discouraging fast fashion purchases. Solutions must address the major barriers to preventing sustainable behaviour. And the top 3 here are separate because they were the top 3, and they're the ones that I think are most important and that we really need to address. So I'm just going to quickly talk through the first 3, and if you have any questions on the others, feel free to ask at the end. But in the book, you'll see this kind of layout. So this is for number 2, which is awareness/understanding. And in the book, there's 1 or 2 sentences just kind of describing the barrier a bit better, and then 1 or 2 quotations just from the interviews we had that kind of justify that or show how we came to that and what it means again for the consumer. So the first barrier is price. And this is talked about a lot. And I think an important thing to mention here is what this actually means. I think a lot of people, there is a stereotype of sustainable and ethically made products being very expensive. And then the idea there is that because they're so expensive, people can't participate in sustainable fashion. But obviously this is not correct, because while buying ethically made products is part of sustainable fashion, it's not the only way to get involved. And I think a lot of people are put off by that, and that links into awareness and understanding as well. But one example I can say is, you know, if you had two t-shirts, one is £6, the other t-shirt is £50, and that's the only information you really have available, you know, you see them hanging on the rack in the shop, we can't expect consumers to know why there is that difference in price unless we educate them. And then this links into barrier number 2, which is awareness and understanding. And we need to educate consumers on the production values and the environmental impacts, and why clothes are a bit more expensive if they are, in order to kind of to bridge that gap. And then also price really links to all the other barriers. The goal is not just to reduce the price of a material good, but it links to alternative forms of consumption such as swap shops, sewing workshops, etc. And by addressing some of the other barriers, we can indirectly address the barrier of price and take that off the top spot of the list of barriers. And then the second one is awareness understanding, which I have already touched on. One of the interviewees shown in that picture was talking about organic cotton, and that people just don't know what that means. And even if you say something's organic, if people don't understand the impact that has, they're not going to spend more money on it or get involved. So education is really an important one that we need to work on. And then finally, number 3, again, a very important one, accessibility / convenience. We need to make sustainable fashion accessible. We need to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved. If it's too difficult, or it's difficult for them to find how to get involved, they're not gonna, they will try and they will start that journey, but they'll get put off very easily. So again, convenience links to kind of on the high street. You know, right now when you go into the high street, there are charity shops and such, but the main retailers are fast fashion brands, and that is what is convenient for people, and that is what they're going to buy, and you shouldn't blame anyone for doing that. But if we are able to make sustainable options more convenient for people, then they are more likely to get involved, and so that is an issue that needs addressed as well. So the second section of the book is engage, educate and empower. And in the book, there are these 3 different sections, each with practical steps, and each step tackles one or more of the barriers that we've spoken about. And I'll show you a page in a second, but these barriers are highlighted in pink to show you which barrier each step will address, so you can decide which ones are most useful to you. So the first section is engage. And this is all about attracting new audiences at the start of their sustainability journey, and then connecting and interacting with audiences to maintain that involvement. And so this is an example of the engage page from the book, sorry. And as you can see, there are you might be able to see the pink text here, which shows you, so for example, widening their understanding, that is addressing the barrier of understanding. So if that is what you're aiming to address, then that is a good step for you to take. So one example, I'll just touch on a couple, is collaborating with brands with similar values. So this would probably be out with fashion. For example, partnering with brands that have environmental values, such as plant-based companies. By doing this, you expand the potential reach of your audience to include their customers who aren't yet aware of sustainable fashion, but are aware of the climate crisis and are engaged with that. So that is a good way to connect with new audiences, which is the goal of that one. Another one is tell your story through video, which is what I'm doing right now. And this is just about that kind of human connection, which is really important right now with lockdown. People stay connected. I've seen actually a couple of designers in Scotland doing this. So Helen Ruth Scarce in Aberdeen has been posting videos on her Instagram explaining kind of the process behind her brand and her design work. And also Emily May, who produces school clothing and accessories in Edinburgh, posted a video in collaboration with another account on sustainable fashion tips. So it's really interesting that that is happening now. I mean, it's probably also due to it being Fashion Revolution Week, but I think it's also the aspect now we're stuck at home. It's a good time to make that video. And people, again, want to stay connected, and video with your face behind it is a really powerful way to do that. I was kind of thinking, you know, big brands use video, but you wouldn't see Philip Green on a Topshop video telling you about their supply chain. So this is a really good opportunity where smaller brands and smaller businesses and activists can have that human connection, and that's genuine as well. And then the last one I wanted to touch on from Engage It's just to be positive. Obviously, right now we are going through a very strange time, and then talking about Rana Plaza is not a positive thing. And while it is important to discuss these, of course, and look at the science, they can sometimes prompt ignorance, which is one of the barriers. People don't want to look; they turn off, they switch off. And there is a lot right now going on, causing anxiety with the news. Each day there's an update, you know. So if you can use your messaging in a positive way, you are encouraging interaction from consumers and just inviting them to stay that little bit longer, and welcoming them in. So I think that is particularly important right now as well. And the second section on this part is educate. And educating consumers on sustainability within fashion is a job that requires intervention from the education system for real change. But until that does happen, I recommend being as transparent about your operations as possible, providing consumers with clear and concise information, and teaching practical skills in a hands-on setting when possible. We need to give them the information so that they can make informed decisions and help increase their understanding. So that barrier of awareness, understanding, is the key barrier addressed through education. And one example just of being transparent, a Scottish brand, Meander Apparel, this week on Instagram showed an insight into their factories for Fashion Revolution Week, and they had pictures of the people holding the I Made Your Clothes sign, and they just wrote a little bit about what goes on in their production, and they had really good engagement from the community on this post. But it's important to continue to do this throughout the year, and not just on this one week, of course. And this helps increase the understanding of production values, and particularly for them, like kind of why the price is different to fast fashion. So that's just a good example I saw of that. But again, if you look in the book, these steps are all broken down into more actionable things that you can actually do, rather than just be transparent, but ways you can do that. And then the final section is empower. So this is really where we move from intention to action. And engaging and educating consumers is pointless if we do not then give them clear steps, guidelines, and the tools required to enable them to follow through with their sustainable intentions. So I recommend promoting local and sustainable brands that people can easily access, hosting events to build personal relationships, and using call to actions to provide consumers with clear next steps to practice that sustainable behaviour and continue on that journey. So again, this is where we move the consumer from intention to behaviour and action, and we make it as easy as possible for them to do so. So this really addresses accessibility as a whole. And I wanted to just touch on local quickly. Obviously now we are in lockdown and we are connecting online globally, which is great. But we are also wanting to connect more with our local communities and help out locally where we can. And I think that post-pandemic local and this idea of community will stay and really be key. So I would prepare to kind of promote that and plan that into your future communications as well. And then just one that I really wanted to touch on from this section is just the idea of call to actions. So it's just a marketing term for any device or communication you put out that is designed to prompt an immediate response or action. So an example of this would just be, you know, at the end of an Instagram post when they tell you about their new collection, and then they say you can get it via the link in our bio, or sign up to our newsletter via the link in our bio. But it can also be even just having a conversation with someone. If someone's asking you questions on sustainable fashion, how they can get involved, you know, you answer them, and then you might say, oh, and you can go to this website to find out more. So it's really just about providing someone with that next step in a really clear way so that they can continue on that journey. So you're really empowering them to do that and to find that information out themselves as well. So that is the 3 sections in the book, and these the list of 8 here is kind of the overall themes for each one. But I just wanted to give some kind of top practical tips for right now and post-pandemic, and how you can kind of adapt them. So I would say when you are planning any form of communication, and just make sure you tick off as many of these kind of overarching themes as possible. Use this as a kind of checklist to see how many you are hitting, or if there's anything you could change to make sure you're ticking off a couple more, just to increase that effectiveness. And secondly, to be mindful of what is and isn't accessible and possible for your audience. So how have the barriers changed due to changing circumstances? Have they changed at all? And are there any new opportunities that have arisen from this for you to encourage more sustainable behaviour if the barriers have changed? And then thirdly, transparency is incredibly important right now. Consumers want the truth, they want to be connected to people and their stories. So share yours, both the struggles and the successes, just to increase that human connection that we all want and need right now. And hopefully when you read the book, you will be able to see that I tried to incorporate some of these tips into my talk today. That was on purpose. And finally, I just wanted to remind you that people do want to support small businesses and the sustainable fashion community during the coronavirus outbreak. But it really is up to all of us and everyone here to address these barriers preventing people from doing so and support individuals moving from intention to action. Together, we can engage, educate, and empower consumers and make it as easy as possible for people to get involved and join in with the collective action required to help drive the system change we need for a positive fashion industry that everyone can be proud of and celebrate. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Antoinette from Bera. She said it's really clear and great to see a strong academic underpinning, but also a practical application of the theory. And that's lovely to hear because that really was my main aim with this. And thank you to Laura, not Catherine, lol, from Berlin. Thanks for joining us from Berlin as well. And I'm glad you're feeling more hopeful for the future of sustainable fashion. I wanted to make sure I ended it on a positive note, so it's not all doom and gloom, because I am feeling hopeful for the future. And thank you, Ruth, as well, for you said you like the focus on empowerment for consumers and removing these barriers, because I think the focus on barriers is something that hasn't been talked about much. It has in academia, but it would be great to move that into really practical applications for people, because it is a really effective approach. And so Haley McDonald has asked, how can people get more involved with Fashion Revolution after Fashion Revolution Week is over? And that's a very good question, because as I said, this is the first year I've gotten involved with them, and I have in the past maybe found it a little difficult to know what is going on, but I think this year in particular, after Fashion Revolution Week, the team have all kind of expressed a lot more interest to keep it going and hopefully host in-person events once this is all over. So I would just recommend following the Instagram on fash_rev_Scotland. There's also a Facebook page which is just Fashion Revolution Scotland. If you would like to get even more involved, just send a message to one of the pages. We have like a WhatsApp group chat, so I'm sure if you did want to get more involved, we could add you into that and help plan some more online events as well. There's been talk of kind of like weekly stitching and sewing groups. I'm not sure, I think it's Jeria, sorry if I've said that wrong. But he says very clear on barriers. Another barrier I can think of is Amazon. Lots of people are hooked on the convenience Amazon offers. In your opinion, should we be encouraging consumers not to use Amazon, or should we try to work together with Amazon? This is actually an issue I've been considering myself over the past week, because I ran out of something which I would normally buy on Amazon, but looking into the ethics of Jeff Bezos, particularly now providing kind of safe working conditions for their employees, has been a real issue. It's not something I've looked into too much, but I do know it's not the most ethical choice. But you're very right, it is a very convenient option and it is used by lots of people. I think if the question is, should we be encouraging consumers not to use Amazon, I think what's important here again is about empowering consumers. So you shouldn't just judge people for using Amazon, because you can't blame them. And you can say to someone, instead of saying you shouldn't shop there, you could say, oh, it's not too great to shop there, but provide them with an alternative and say, here is another place you could go instead to get that. And I was looking at, say, support small businesses that offer similar products where available. Where it's not available, I'm not too sure what the option would be there, if they maybe just try and ask them to think a little more if they really need it or not. But I mean, if it is something that you need and that's the only place you can get it, we shouldn't feel bad for that right now. The ideal option would be that, again, as you've said, should we try and work with Amazon, that they do improve their ethical practices. So maybe encouraging people to find alternative options and support smaller businesses or more ethical companies, but also putting pressure on Amazon through kind of similar campaigns to Fashion Revolution, even if it's not fashion specific, would be my answer to that. I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer for that. It is a very difficult one, but I hope that helps a little bit. Thank you. And then Sarah Johnson has said, I think consumer behaviour is important, but the danger of telling individuals to boycott brands is that it plays into cancel culture and shaming people for behaviour which actually disengages people. And I think the most pressure should be put on brands. And I definitely agree with this. I bought a pair of boots from ASOS in winter, and I'm quite happy to kind of confess that. Maybe isn't the best word, but just to say that. Because there was no other place for me. I have size 7 feet, so it wasn't very possible to get those secondhand. And I think that is an important point, but I do hope that the tips I've shared today are that we need to, and that's why I've used the word encourage, we need to encourage people, not judge them or make them feel bad for their decisions. And it's that kind of positivity that we need, and we need to gently educate people and inform them, but providing them with what they can do so that they feel empowered rather than shamed. I think that's important there. I like the term conscious consumerism because it just means stopping and thinking about more what we are consuming, and particularly with a focus on kind of products, whether we really need these products or not. And Fashion Revolution does that a lot with the kind of, when you buy a product, think, will you wear it 30 times or not? And I like to encourage people, if you are going to buy something, I always think about how I can incorporate it into my existing wardrobe and how many outfits I can make from this one piece. So even just sharing little snippets of information like that on like your social media and stuff can really help people and encourage them rather than make them feel bad about it. And Catherine says, I think it's about encouraging lots of people to make little changes rather than expecting people to change their entire lifestyles and habits. If lots of people make one small change, it can have a huge impact. And I also think that's very important. And I'm glad you said that, Catherine. And so from the steps that are in the ebook, you don't have to do them all, and you don't have to change people's whole lifestyles. But even if you do use one tip and get someone to make progress on that kind of journey, and then that is a huge impact you are having and contributing to that collective action. So I think we should all be proud of whatever progress we do make, and not feel bad about when we do need to buy from fast fashion or other alternatives, I guess. And Jodie says, inspiring talk, Mairi. Thanks, Jodie. And the point on gently educating is key, as I think people are put off as they don't know where to start, and breaking it down makes it less daunting. And I agree with this too. I was having a discussion with people in the Fashion Revolution chat today and yesterday, because I don't know how to sew. And I'm the one kind of talking about all this, like sustainable fashion. So sometimes can feel a bit of like imposter syndrome or a bit of a fraud. And I don't have materials in my flat, and 2 or 3 people have offered to help with lessons and provide equipment. And there are more things online now coming with virtual mending workshops and things like that. So I think, gently educating people, staying positive, inviting them to learn more, not judging people, is definitely the way forward. That kind of positive attitude rather than shaming people. Because I've not told anyone that I can't sew or don't have any sewing equipment for a while. So, but I know it's important to share that. And if other people, the more transparent we are about our own things, and that encourages other people to be open about it as well, and encourage them to keep learning. If you do have anything else you'd like to ask, or if you read the ebook and have any questions, or would like any advice on how you can incorporate these into your marketing strategies, that is kind of my job, but I'm happy to even just give some advice over a quick call. So if you would like to do that, just get in touch with me on Instagram or LinkedIn. And I hope you do enjoy the ebook, because it did take me a while. A lot of tears went into it and stress. But I really enjoyed it. And for my dissertation for my master's in social innovation, I'm about to start. I'm looking into sustainability and fashion in Scotland again, but this time with a focus on how we can encourage the community to connect with one another, and kind of marketing tools we can use to encourage that participation. And so it's a bit of a different angle, but I'm really intrigued, and I'll be getting in touch with some people in the community to kind of help co-create that project. So if you're interested in that as well, please reach out, and we can maybe work on that together. But thank you very much for coming along, and hopefully I'll speak to some of you soon. And I hope from today you've taken away lots of practical steps you can use to help drive positive change in the fashion industry. I'll just show you this last slide here with some call to actions where you can find out some more information. So you can get the ebook at mairilowe.com/ebook. I've tried to make it as interactive as possible with kind of links, so you can, it's kind of quite an interactive experience and you can get the most out of it. You can find me on most social medias at Mairi Lowe, but Instagram is the one that I use the most. And then feel free to connect me on LinkedIn too. And I would like to recommend you to follow Fashion Revolution Scotland. The team this year has been incredible. It's the first year I've really gotten involved, and I felt really welcome and amazed at all the hard work they have done. And there's been some amazing events on this week. This is the last day of Fashion Revolution Week. However, we're in the next couple of weeks we'll be uploading recordings from the events. So follow them for updates, and if you want to catch up on anything you might have missed. And then the main Fashion Revolution account is fash_rev on Instagram as well. And then this last one at the bottom is a project that I've been working on for the past few months. And it is just like an extension from my ebook. I've been working with some people in the community in Scotland, with our main aim being how to facilitate collaborations between people and how we can connect the community. So we're still figuring out where our place is really in the community, but it's a good place to find out some more information on what is going on in Scotland as well. So if you'd like to give that a follow, feel free.